Commander Thelax stood before the young warriors, his blue-scaled chest covered with scars that told 1,000 stories. The recruits looked at him with wide eyes, their tails twitching with nervous energy. They wanted to hear about the battles. They always did. You want to know about fear? Thelax asked, his voice deep and rough. I have fought the Void Swarmers on the ice fields of Korath 7, creatures made of living crystal that could melt your flesh with a single touch. I watched them tear through a battalion of Valorian shock troops in minutes. The young Kryn warriors leaned forward. One of them, barely past his first molting, whispered, Were you afraid, Commander? Thelax touched the golden crest on his chest armor. The crest of unbroken will. Only 50 warriors in the entire Kryn Empire had ever earned it. You got it by never retreating from battle, never running, never breaking. Fear is for prey animals, Thelax said. We are Kryn, we are predators. When I faced the swarmers, I felt nothing but the joy of combat. When the Reavers attacked Charon Station with their biomechanical horrors, I stood at the breach for 30 hours straight. My arms grew tired of killing, but I never felt fear. It was true. Thelax had fought in 12 full cycles of war. He had seen things that would drive other species mad. The Reavers were machines fused with dead flesh, creatures that screamed with voices of the beings they used to be. The Void Swarmers moved like liquid death. Impossible to predict, impossible to stop with normal weapons. But Thelax had stopped them. He had killed hundreds, thousands. His battle record was perfect. 0 retreats. 0 failures, Commander! A young officer burst into the training hall. The council calls for you. Emergency session. Thelax dismissed the recruits and made his way to the council chamber. The halls of the military complex were filled with activity. Something big was happening. He could feel it in the air. The council chamber was packed with high-ranking officers from across the coalition. Not just Kryn, but Valorians with their forearms and crystalline eyes and the insectoid Tiskara with their clicking mandibles. This was serious. Commander Thelax, the High Commander spoke, his old scales pale with age. The Zathor hive has begun its expansion into coalition space. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a planet, then another, all dead, all consumed. The Zathor were like a plague. They landed on a world, stripped it of all life and resources, and moved on. They didn't negotiate. They didn't stop. They just consumed. The coalition is forming a joint task force, the High Commander continued. Our best warriors from every species. You have been selected to lead the Kryn contingent. Thelax felt pride surge through him. This was it. The greatest battle of his life. A chance to prove himself against the worst threat the galaxy had ever seen. I accept with honor, he said, placing his fist over his heart. There is one more thing, the High Commander said, and something in his voice made Thelax pause. A new species has joined the coalition. They call themselves humans. They will be fighting alongside us, murmurs filled the chamber. Humans? Thelax had heard rumors. A primitive species from a backwater system called Sol. They had only just developed faster-than-light travel a few cycles ago. What could they possibly offer in a war like this? The hologram changed, showing images of humans. Thelax studied them carefully. They were small, barely reaching a Kryn warrior's shoulder. They had soft skin with no scales, no armor plating, no natural weapons. No claws, no fangs. Their eyes were tiny and could only see in a narrow range of light. They look weak, a Valorian commander said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Their military technology is adequate, the High Commander said, but even he didn't sound convinced. The Coalition Council has decided to give them a chance. They are eager to prove themselves. Thelax felt something twist in his stomach. Not fear, he didn't feel fear, but something else. Disappointment, maybe. He was going to war against the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy, and they were giving him babysitter's duty. He would have to protect these soft little creatures instead of focusing on the battle. How many human units will be attached to my battalion? Thelax asked. 1 platoon, 40 soldiers under the command of someone called Captain Sarah Chen. 40. Thelax commanded 200 Kryn warriors, each one a veteran of multiple campaigns. 40 humans wouldn't make a difference. They would probably die in the first engagement. Understood, Thelax said. When do we deploy? 3 days. The humans arrive tomorrow for joint training exercises. That night, Thelax couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the battles ahead. The Zathor were different from anything he had fought before. They were a true hive mind. Billions of bodies controlled by a single intelligence. They learned from every battle, adapted to every strategy. They had wiped out entire civilizations. But Thelax wasn't worried about the Zathor. He was a warrior. Death in battle was honorable. Expected even, he was worried about the humans. How many would die under his command? How would their deaths be his responsibility? In Kryn culture, you didn't mourn warriors who fell in battle. They died with honor. But these humans were barely more than children in the ways of war. Their whole species had only been in space for a few cycles. The next morning, Thelax stood on the landing platform as the human transport ship arrived. It was small, ugly, and functional. No decorations, no pride in its design. Just a metal box with engines. The door opened and the humans marched out. Thelax watched them carefully. They moved in formation, disciplined and precise. Their equipment was clean and well-maintained. They wore armor that looked almost primitive compared to Kryn battlesuits, but it was practical. Each human carried a rifle and various other weapons. At the front walked a human female. She was small, even for a human, with dark hair pulled back tight. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She approached Thelax and saluted in the coalition style. "Commander Thelax," she said, "I'm Captain Sarah Chen. My platoon is ready for assignment." Her voice was calm, steady. No nervousness, no fear. Thelax studied her face, looking for signs of doubt. He found none. "Welcome to the battalion, Captain," Thelax said. "Have your soldiers been briefed on Zathor combat tactics?" "Yes, sir. We've studied all available data." "Good. Tomorrow we begin joint training exercises. Try to keep up." It wasn't meant as an insult, just a statement of fact. The Kryn trained hard, pushed themselves to the absolute limit. Most species couldn't match their endurance. Captain Chen smiled slightly. "We'll do our best, sir." As the humans were shown to their quarters, Thelax watched them go. They seemed professional enough, but studying data and facing real combat were two very different things. He had seen veteran warriors break when confronted with the reality of the Zathor. These soft, small, weak creatures would probably run at the first sight of the enemy. Thelax touched his crest of unbroken will one more time. He had never retreated from battle. He had faced every nightmare the galaxy could throw at him without fear. He just hoped the humans wouldn't slow him down. The training exercises began at dawn. Thelax watched as his Kryn warriors demonstrated proper combat formations. They moved like a living weapon, each warrior knowing exactly where the others would be. It was beautiful in its way. The art of war perfected over thousands of years. The humans watched quietly. Too quietly. Thelax had expected questions, confusion, maybe even fear. Instead, they just observed and took notes. "Captain Chen," Thelax called out. "Your turn. Show us how humans fight." The human captain nodded and spoke quietly to her soldiers. They spread out across the training field in a pattern that made no sense to Thelax. There was no clear formation, no obvious strategy. They seemed scattered, disorganized. "Captain, your soldiers are not in proper formation," Thelax said. "We don't use the same formations, Commander," Chen replied. "May we demonstrate?" Thelax gestured for her to continue. He was curious now. The humans began a mock battle exercise against training drones. Instead of charging forward like proper warriors, they scattered even further. They used every piece of cover on the field, rocks and barriers that Thelax hadn't even considered important. They moved quickly from position to position, never staying in one place long. Their shooting was precise. Disturbingly precise. While Kryn warriors relied on overwhelming firepower and personal shields, the humans aimed for specific weak points on the drones, joint connections, sensor arrays, power cores. The exercise ended in less than 2 minutes. All drones were destroyed. Not a single human had been hit. "Interesting," Thelax admitted, "but training drones are not real enemies. The Zathor will not fall so easily." "No, sir," Chen agreed. "We're counting on that." Something about the way she said it made Thelax uncomfortable, like she was looking forward to a harder fight. Over the next 2 days, Thelax watched the humans closely. They asked strange questions during briefings. Questions about enemy biology that seemed irrelevant. Questions about supply lines and infrastructure that had nothing to do with direct combat. They studied maps with an intensity that bordered on obsession, marking things that Thelax couldn't understand the importance of. They also did something else that confused him. Every evening, the humans gathered together and talked. Not about weapons or tactics, but about their lives, their families, their homes. They showed each other pictures on their data pads. They laughed. They told stories. Kryn warriors didn't do this. War was sacred. You focused on battle, on honor, on glory. Personal attachments made you weak. On the third day, they received their orders. A Zathor scout force had been detected on the edge of the Valar system. The battalion would deploy immediately to intercept and destroy it. This would be the humans' first real combat against the Zathor. The transport ship was cramped with all the different species packed inside. Thelax stood with his warriors, going through pre-battle rituals, breathing exercises, mental preparation, focusing the mind on the honor of combat. He noticed Captain Chen sitting with one of her soldiers. The young human male looked nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he checked his rifle for the 10th time. "Martinez," Chen said quietly. "Look at me." The young soldier looked up at his captain. "You're going to be fine," she said. "Stay with your squad. Follow your training. We all come home together. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Martinez said, but his hands still shook. Thelax felt disgust. A warrior who was afraid before battle had no place in combat. He should be removed from the unit before his fear spread to others. But Chen just squeezed the young soldier's shoulder and moved on to check the others. She didn't seem bothered by his fear at all. They landed on a barren moon, all rock and dust. Sensors had detected the Zathor scout pack moving through a canyon system, 3 kilometers from their position. The plan was simple: advance, engage, destroy. Thelax led his warriors forward with the humans spread out behind them. The Kryn moved in a tight formation, shields overlapping, weapons ready. Perfect textbook advance. They entered the canyon, and that's when the Zathor attacked. They came from everywhere at once. The Zathor scouts were smaller than the warrior class, but fast and vicious. They had too many legs, too many eyes, and mandibles that could cut through armor. They screeched with voices that weren't quite biological, weren't quite mechanical. Thelax roared and charged forward. This was what he lived for, the pure joy of combat. His plasma blade cut through 3 Zathor in one swing. Around him, his Kryn warriors fought with practiced efficiency. They were taking losses, but that was expected, acceptable. The battle was brutal but straightforward.
Kill or be killed.
Honorable combat. Then Thelax noticed something strange. The humans weren't with them. They hadn't charged. For a moment he thought they had run away, and anger filled him. But then he saw where they actually were. The humans had scattered into the canyon walls. They were using small ledges and cracks that Thelax hadn't even noticed. They were above the Zathor, beside them, creating crossing lines of fire that trapped the enemy in a killing zone. A Zathor warrior tried to flank Thelax's position. Before it could strike, its legs exploded from precisely aimed shots. It fell, and a human put 3 rounds through its sensory cluster. Dead in seconds. The humans weren't fighting like warriors. They were fighting like hunters, like predators who killed without ever being seen. The battle ended. The Zathor scout pack was eliminated. Thelax looked around at his warriors. 8 dead, 12 wounded. An acceptable loss ratio for the first engagement. The humans had 0 casualties. "Your tactics are unusual," Thelax said to Captain Chen after the battle. "They work," she replied simply. "You did not charge with us. You hid. Is this honorable?" Chen looked at him with those small, strange human eyes. "With respect, Commander, we're not here for honor. We're here to win." That night, Thelax couldn't stop thinking about those words. In every culture he knew, war was about more than just victory. It was about proving yourself, about honor and glory and the respect of your enemies. But the humans seemed to care about none of that. He found himself watching them again as they gathered around their small camp. That young soldier, Martinez, was being congratulated by his squad mates. He had performed well in battle despite his fear. A human medic was working on a wounded Kryn warrior. The warrior had taken a blade through his shoulder, but would survive. The medic's hands were shaking as she worked, and Thelax could smell the stress hormones coming off her. She was terrified, but her hands were steady when it mattered. "Why do your hands shake?" Thelax asked her. "The battle is over." The medic looked up at him. She was young, probably barely trained. "Because people almost died, sir," she said quietly. "Every time someone gets hurt, it matters. Every single time." "He is a warrior," Thelax said. He knew he might be wounded. He accepted that risk. "That doesn't make it easier," the medic said. She finished her work and moved to the next patient. Thelax watched her go. In Kryn culture, medics were necessary but not honored. Warriors accepted injury as part of battle. You didn't weep over the wounded, but this human medic treated every injury like a personal tragedy, like each life was precious beyond measure. Thelax had fought the Void Swarmers and felt nothing. He had watched the Reavers tear through his comrades and felt only anger at the enemy, not grief for the fallen. But these humans shook with fear before battle and trembled with relief after it. They cared about every life, even the ones they couldn't save. Thelax returned to his quarters confused in a way he had never been before. The humans had fought well, better than he expected. Their tactics were effective even if they were strange. But something about them bothered him deeply. They were afraid, but they fought anyway. They cared about death, but they dealt it efficiently. They had no honor in the traditional sense, but they protected each other with fierce devotion. What kind of warriors were they? Thelax touched his crest of unbroken will. He had never felt fear in battle. He had never retreated. He had never broken. But for the first time in his long military career, he felt uncertain. And uncertainty was something very close to fear. The order came 2 weeks later. The Coalition was launching a major offensive to retake Villar 9, a mining colony that the Zathor had captured. The colony was important because it produced rare metals needed for ship construction. Without it, the Coalition's ability to build new warships would be crippled. Thelax studied the battle plans in the command briefing. It was straightforward. 3 battalions would attack from different directions, overwhelming the Zathor defenders with superior numbers and firepower. Classic Coalition tactics. Proven tactics. The Zathor have approximately 5,000 warriors defending the colony, the Valorian general explained. We will hit them with 15,000 troops. Standard assault formation. We advance, we overwhelm, we win. Captain Chen raised her hand. Sir, has there been updated reconnaissance? The intelligence reports are 3 days old. The Zathor don't change their tactics that quickly, the general said dismissively. They're predictable. That's their weakness. Thelax saw Chen's jaw tighten, but she said nothing more. Around her, the other human soldiers exchanged glances. They didn't look convinced. The assault began at dawn. Thelax led his warriors from the front, as always. The landing was rough. Zathor anti-air defenses were stronger than expected, and several transport ships were destroyed before they could land. But that was acceptable. Losses were part of war. They advanced on the colony in formation. The buildings were a mix of mining equipment and residential structures, now covered with the organic-looking growth that the Zathor spread everywhere they went. It looked like tumors growing on metal and stone. The Zathor met them at the colony perimeter. They came in waves, endless waves, more than 5,000, much more. Intelligence had been wrong. Thelax fought like he always did, with honor, with strength, with skill. His plasma blade carved through Zathor warriors. His rifle dropped enemies at range. Around him, his Kryn warriors fought brilliantly, but they were being pushed back. The Zathor had fortified the colony far beyond what intelligence had predicted. They had dug tunnels, created ambush points, set traps. Every street was a killing ground. Every building a fortress. Coalition casualties mounted rapidly. The Valorian contingent on the left flank broke and retreated after losing half their numbers. The Tsikara on the right were pinned down, unable to advance or withdraw. Thelax's warriors were dying. Not with honor and glorious combat, but cut down by enemies they couldn't even see, shot from windows, dragged into tunnels, overwhelmed by superior numbers and position. For the first time in his life, Thelax considered retreat. Not out of fear, but out of tactical necessity. They were losing. The battle was lost. Commander! Captain Chen appeared beside him, ducking behind cover as plasma fire screamed overhead. We need to pull back and regroup. A Kryn warrior does not retreat. Thelax roared, but even he could hear the doubt in his own voice. Then we all die here for nothing, Chen shouted back. Sir, let me try something. Please, Thelax looked at her. The human was covered in dust and blood, none of it her own. Her eyes were intense, desperate. But there was something else there too. A plan, an idea. What do you propose? Let us handle this. But you have to trust me and you're not going to like it. Thelax had no better options. Do it. Chen spoke rapidly into her communication device. Within minutes, the human platoon began pulling back. But they weren't retreating in panic. They were moving with purpose, spreading out through the colony in small teams. What are they doing? One of Thelax's officers asked. I don't know, Thelax admitted. For 30 minutes, the humans disappeared into the colony. The Zathor, sensing weakness, pushed harder. Thelex and his warriors fell back step by bloody step. He was about to order a full retreat when Chen's voice came over the comm. "Commander, we need you to pull all coalition forces back at least 1 kilometer from the colony center. You have 10 minutes. What? Why, please, sir. Trust me, 10 minutes. Something in her voice made Thelax obey. He ordered the retreat. His warriors pulled back, fighting every step. The Zathor followed, thinking they had won. 9 minutes later, all coalition forces were clear of the colony center. "Captain, we are clear." "What?" The explosion cut off his words. The entire center of the mining colony erupted in a ball of white fire. The fusion reactor that powered the mining equipment had gone critical. The blast was massive, a miniature sun born and dying in seconds. Thelax watched in horror as the shockwave expanded. Buildings vaporized. The Zathor organic growth burned away like paper. The enemy warriors that had been pursuing them were caught in the blast, thousands of them simply ceasing to exist. When the light faded, the colony center was gone. Just a smoking crater where billions of credits worth of infrastructure had stood. Captain Chen appeared beside him again, her face grim. "The colony is clear of Zathor. We'll need to rebuild, but it's ours. You destroyed it," Thelax said, unable to believe what he had seen. "The whole colony?" "The resources. The infrastructure. That colony took decades to build. We couldn't let the Zathor have it," Chen said simply. "We can rebuild. They would have just used it as a fortress to launch more attacks. Better it's destroyed than in their hands. But the resources we needed, we'll mine somewhere else. We'll build new equipment. It's just metal and machines, Commander. We can make more." She paused. The alternative was leaving 2,000 coalition soldiers dead in that colony. "I chose the soldiers." Thelax stared at her. In all his years of war, he had never seen anything like this. The humans had rigged the entire reactor to overload. They had hacked into the Zathor communications somehow and broadcast a signal that drew all the enemy forces to the center. They had turned the colony itself into a weapon, and they had done it in less than 30 minutes. "How did you know it would work?" Thelax asked. "I didn't," Chen admitted, "but it was the best option we had. The Zathor don't think like us. They don't understand sacrifice. They wouldn't expect us to destroy something valuable just to deny it to them." Later that night, Thelax sat alone in his quarters. The battle had been a victory technically. The colony was retaken. The Zathor were eliminated. But it didn't feel like victory. He had always fought for honor, for glory, for the pride of the Kryn Empire. Battles were sacred things, tests of courage and strength. You fought face to face with your enemy. You won or died trying, but you did it with honor. The humans didn't care about any of that. They cared about winning, and they would do anything to win, sacrifice anything, destroy anything. They had no honor in the traditional sense. But they had something else. Something Thelax was beginning to understand was more dangerous than honor could ever be. They had will, pure, unbreakable will. They decided what needed to happen, and then they made it happen no matter the cost. Thelax touched his crest of unbroken will. He had earned it by never retreating, never breaking, never showing weakness. It was the highest honor a Kryn warrior could achieve. But watching the humans, he wondered if he truly understood what an unbroken will meant. He had never retreated because his honor demanded he stand and fight. But what if honor demanded something else? What if winning required doing things that weren't honorable? The humans had solved that problem by simply not caring about honor. They cared about survival, about protecting their people, about winning at any cost. And that made them more terrifying than any enemy Thelax had ever faced. Because the Void Swarmers could be killed, the Reavers could be destroyed, the Zathor could be defeated. But how do you defeat an enemy that refuses to lose, that will sacrifice anything, destroy anything, do anything to achieve victory? You can't. Thelax realized something in that moment. He had been wrong about the humans. They weren't weak. They weren't primitives who needed protection. They were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they were just getting started. The call came 6 weeks after the Valar 9 operation. Every officer in the Coalition military knew what it meant when the High Command summoned everyone for an emergency briefing. Something big. Something final. Thelax entered the command center with Captain Chen walking beside him. Over the past weeks, they had fought 3 more battles together. Each time, Thelax had learned something new about humans. Each time, his understanding of war had shifted slightly. The hologram at the center of the room showed a planet. Dark, covered in the organic growth of the Zathor hive. This was their home world, their source. the center of their entire species. "We've located the primary hive intelligence," the Valorian commander announced. "Deep in the core of their homeworld. If we can destroy it, the entire Zathor species will collapse. They'll become mindless, uncoordinated. We can eliminate them easily after that." There was silence in the room. Everyone understood what this meant. "The problem is getting there," the commander continued. "The hive world has defenses unlike anything we've ever seen. Thousands of orbital weapons, millions of warrior-class Zathor on the surface. The planetary shields are almost impenetrable." The hologram zoomed in, showing a narrow opening in the shield network. "We have a window. Exactly 43 minutes when their shield generators cycle for maintenance. During that time, we can drop assault pods through the opening, maybe 200 soldiers maximum before the window closes." "A suicide mission," someone said quietly. "Yes," the commander agreed. "Anyone who volunteers will almost certainly die. But if we succeed, we end this war. We save billions of lives across the galaxy." Thelak stood. "I volunteer." He said it without hesitation. This was what his entire life had prepared him for. A glorious death in the greatest battle ever fought. His name would be remembered forever. Songs would be sung about this day. Around the room, other officers stood. Kryn, Valorian, Tiskra, the best warriors from every species. Captain Chen stood. Then every single human in the room stood with her. "Captain," Thelak said quietly, "you don't have to do this. Your species is new to this war. No one will think less of you." "We're going," Chen said. Her voice left no room for argument. "Someone has to do it. Might as well be us." 3 days later, Thelak stood in the assault pod, packed in with 20 other soldiers, half Kryn, half human. The ship carrying them raced toward the hive world at maximum speed. Thelak could feel his hearts beating steady and strong. No fear, just anticipation. This was what he was born to do. He looked at the humans around him. Their hearts were beating fast, too fast. He could smell the stress chemicals in their sweat. They were terrified, but they were here anyway. 2 minutes to drop, the pilot announced. The ship shook as Zathor weapons struck it. Shields held but barely. 1 minute. Martinez, the young human soldier, was gripping his rifle so hard his knuckles were white. Thelak could see him shaking. "Martinez," Captain Chen said. "Eyes on me." The young soldier looked at his captain. "We're all afraid," she said. "Every one of us. But we're doing this anyway. You know why? Because it has to be done, ma'am." "That's right. It has to be done. So we're going to do it." 10 seconds. The assault pod door opened. Below them, the hive world waited. Dark, hostile, and ready to kill them. "Go. Go, go," they dropped. The descent was chaos. Zathor anti-air fire filled the sky. Pods were hit and destroyed all around them. Thelak watched 3 pods explode, taking their soldiers with them. Acceptable losses. Expected losses. Their pod hit the ground hard. The door blew open and they poured out into a nightmare. The hive world surface was organic and wrong. The ground moved beneath their feet like diseased flesh. Zathor warriors were everywhere, already responding to their landing. The sky was dark, lit only by weapon fire and explosions. "Move to the rally point," Chen shouted. "Don't stop. Don't look back," they ran. Zathor came at them from every direction. Thelak fought like never before, his blade singing through the air. Human soldiers fired in controlled bursts, their aim perfect even while running. They reached the rally point, or what should have been the rally point. It was supposed to be a small hill where they could regroup. Instead, it was crawling with Zathor. "Alternate route," Chen ordered. "Head for the canyon." More pods were landing, but fewer than expected. Thelak saw one pod crushed by a Zathor heavy warrior before anyone could get out. Saw another swarm the moment it opened. They fought their way to the canyon. Of the 200 soldiers who had dropped, maybe 60 made it to the rally. Maybe, and they were still 10 kilometers from their target. The hive core was deep underground. They had to fight through 10 kilometers of Zathor territory to reach the entrance, then fight down into the depths, then plant the antimatter charge, then escape before it detonated. Impossible. Everyone knew it was impossible. "We keep moving," Chen said. "Stay together. Watch each other's backs. We finish this." They moved through the canyon. Zathor attacked constantly. Every step was a battle. Every meter was paid for in blood. Thelak watched a Kryn warrior go down, dragged into a side tunnel by 3 Zathor. Watched a human soldier take a blade through the chest, then use her last breath to throw a grenade into a cluster of enemies. The number of survivors kept dropping. 60 became 50. 50 became 40. 40 became 30. They were cut off from extraction. Cut off from support. The communication network was down. They were alone on an enemy world with millions of hostiles between them and safety. This was when warriors broke. When hope died and fear took over, but the humans didn't stop. They kept moving forward. Thelax saw things that day that he would never forget. He saw a human soldier with a shattered leg refuse to be left behind. The soldier found a piece of metal wreckage and used it as a crutch, hobbling forward, still fighting. He saw another human gut shot and dying. The soldier knew he was dead, but instead of asking for mercy or crying for help, he used his last minutes to hack into a Zathor communication node. The soldier uploaded the node's location and security codes to the survivors' data systems, then died with his hand still on the keyboard. Why? Thelax asked Captain Chen as they took cover from another wave of Zathor. Why don't you stop? We're going to die here. Why not die with honor instead of dragging it out? Chen looked at him with those strange human eyes. Because giving up is dying. Fighting is living. As long as we're moving forward, we haven't lost yet. 20 survivors remained when they reached the entrance to the hive core. The entrance was guarded by massive warrior-class Zathor, each one 3 times the size of a normal soldier. We'll never get through, a Valorian officer said, despair in his voice. Yes, we will, Chen said. She turned to her remaining humans. 12 of them left from the original 40. We go together, all of us. One last push, Thelax realized what she meant. One last suicidal charge to break through the entrance. One last desperate attempt to complete the mission, knowing they would all die doing it. For the coalition. Thelax roared and charged. The humans charged with him. They screamed as they ran. Not war cries or battle songs, but just screaming. Raw primal sounds of defiance and rage and terror all mixed together. They hit the Zathor line like a hammer. The fighting was brutal. Close range, desperate. Thelax saw Martinez, the young soldier who had been so afraid at the start, ram his rifle into a Zathor's sensory cluster and pull the trigger until the weapon overheated. They broke through. 8 survivors now. Into the hive core entrance. Down into the depths. The antimatter charge was heavy. It took 2 soldiers to carry it. They moved through organic tunnels that pulsed like living veins. The Zathor intelligence was down here somewhere in the deepest part of its fortress. 7 survivors. 6. 5. They reached the core chamber. It was massive, a cathedral of organic technology and biological horror. In the center, something that might have been a brain or might have been a computer or might have been both. The heart of the Zathor hive. Captain Chen and 3 other humans remained. Thelax and 1 other Kryn, that was all. Chen pulled out the antimatter charge. 10-minute timer, she said. That should give us enough time to get clear. Except there was no getting clear. The way they had come was blocked. Zathor were pouring in from every tunnel. Hundreds of them. They had minutes at best. Go, Chen said to Thelax. Take Private Williams with you. Find another way out. Run. I don't run, Thelax said. This isn't about honor, Commander. Chen grabbed his arm, and he was shocked at the strength in her grip. Someone has to survive to tell them we were here. Someone has to report that the mission succeeded. That's you. I will not leave you. Yes, Chen said, you will. Because that's the mission now. Williams, get him out of here. The human soldier Williams grabbed Thelax. For such a small creature, she was surprisingly strong when desperate. She pulled him toward a side tunnel. Thelax fought against her, but another explosion rocked the chamber. The Zathor were closing in. Tell them, Captain Chen said, her eyes meeting his one last time. Tell them we were here. Tell them we finished it. Williams dragged Thelax into the tunnel. The last thing he saw was Captain Chen and her 3 remaining soldiers forming a perimeter around the antimatter charge. Their weapons raised against the incoming horde of Zathor. Then the tunnel collapsed behind them, and Thelax was running. Thelax ran through the tunnels of the dying hive world. Private Williams beside him. The ground shook beneath their feet. Structural collapse. The antimatter charge had detonated. Captain Chen was gone. Her soldiers were gone. 40 humans had dropped onto this world. None of them were coming home. But the mission was complete. Williams found an exit tunnel partially collapsed but navigable. They crawled through rubble and organic debris, racing against the dying planet's convulsions. Behind them, the hive core was destroying itself. The intelligence gone, the connection severed. They reached the surface just as an extraction ship swooped down. The pilot had stayed, refusing to leave until all hope was lost. Thelax and Williams were pulled aboard, and the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed just as the hive world began to tear itself apart. In the medical bay, Thelax sat in silence. Williams was being treated for her injuries. Around them, the few other survivors from the assault were being processed. Out of 200 soldiers who had dropped, 18 had made it out alive. Only 2 of them were human. Williams and a soldier named Rodriguez, 38 humans dead. Captain Chen dead. The war ended within a week. Without the Central Intelligence, the Zathor became mindless. They fought on instinct rather than strategy. The coalition forces swept through their remaining territories, eliminating them system by system. Victory, complete and total. But Thelax felt nothing. 3 cycles passed. The galaxy began to rebuild. Colonies were re-established. Trade routes reopened. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such a war. Thelax returned to his duties, training new warriors, passing on his knowledge. But something had changed in him. Something fundamental. He was asked to speak at memorial ceremonies, many of them. Every species wanted to honor their dead, to remember those who had fallen. On the 3rd anniversary of the final assault, Thelax stood before a gathering of young coalition soldiers. They were fresh recruits, eager to hear stories of the war. They wanted to know about the battles, the glory, the honor. They wanted to know about the monsters. "You want to hear about monsters," Thelax began. His voice was different now, softer than it had been. "I have faced many. The void swarmers that could melt your flesh with a touch. The reavers, machines built from dead flesh that screamed with stolen voices. The Zathor hive, a species that consumed entire worlds." The young soldiers leaned forward, eager. These things were terrifying. They were powerful. They were dangerous. But they were not what frightened me most. Confusion rippled through the audience. "What frightened me," Thelax continued, "was fighting alongside humanity." He told them about the humans, about Captain Chen and her platoon, about Martinez, who was afraid but fought anyway, about the medic whose hands shook but never stopped working, about the humans who sacrificed a colony to deny it to the enemy, about the soldiers who kept fighting with broken bodies and dying breaths. "I earned this," Thelax said, touching the crest of unbroken will on his chest, "for never retreating from battle, for never showing fear, for never breaking. I was proud of it. I thought I understood what it meant to have an unbroken will." He removed the crest from his armor, but I was wrong. An unbroken will is not about never feeling fear. It's about feeling fear and moving forward anyway. It's not about never wanting to retreat. It's about standing your ground when every instinct tells you to run. He held up the crest. "Humans taught me this. They are small. They are weak. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no biological advantages. They are afraid of death. They mourn their fallen. They shake before battle and weep after it. But they do not stop. They do not give up. They decide what must be done, and then they do it, no matter the cost. They sacrifice everything, not for glory or honor, but because someone has to stand, and they choose to be that someone." The audience was silent now, hanging on every word. The void swarmers kill without thought. The reavers fight because they are programmed. The Zathor consume because it is their nature. These things are monsters, yes, but they are predictable. They follow their nature. Humans are different. They fight against their nature. Every battle, every day, they choose to stand against the darkness, knowing it might destroy them. They do not fight because they have to. They fight because they decide to. And that decision, that choice, is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Thelax walked to the human memorial wall. It was a massive structure, covering an entire plaza. The names of every human who had died in the war were inscribed on it. Thousands of names. Chen, Sarah, Martinez, Juan, Rodriguez's brother Carlos, so many others. He placed his crest of unbroken will at the base of the wall. Around it were thousands of other offerings, medals from Kryn warriors, crystals from Valorians, sacred stones from the Tiskra. The greatest honors each species could give, all laid at the feet of humanity's dead. "I fought without fear," Thelax said to the gathered soldiers, "but the humans fought with fear and they won anyway. That is true courage. That is true strength. That is what an unbroken will really means." A young human approached. She was small, probably only 16 or 17 cycles old. She had dark hair like Captain Chen, pulled back in the same style. "Excuse me," she said. Are you Commander Thelax? I am. My name is Sarah Chen. I was Captain Chen's daughter. Thelax felt something break inside him. Something that had been holding together through willpower alone. He knelt down so he was at eye level with the young human. Your mother, he said, his voice rough with emotion he had never learned to express properly, was the bravest warrior I ever fought beside. She taught me what courage truly means. Everyone says that, Sarah said, but no one can really explain what she did, what she was like. They just say she was a hero and that she died honorably. Do you want to know what she was really like? The girl nodded. She was afraid, Thelax said. Every battle, every day. I could smell the fear on her. Could hear her heart racing before combat. She was terrified. Sarah looked confused. But she was a Marine. A captain? Yes, and that made her fear even more remarkable. Because she was afraid, but she fought anyway. She cared about every life, mourned every loss, and felt every wound her soldiers took as if it were her own. And then she stood up and led them into battle again. She used to tell me something, Sarah said quietly, before she deployed. She'd say, someone has to stand. Might as well be us. Thelax felt those words hit him like a physical blow. He remembered Captain Chen saying those exact words in the Hive Corps, in her last moments. That, he said, is the essence of humanity. You are not the strongest species. You are not the fastest or the most advanced. But when darkness comes, you stand. Not because you have to, not because you are compelled by honor or instinct or programming, but because you choose to. And that choice, he continued, that willingness to stand when you could run, to fight when you could surrender, to sacrifice when you could save yourselves, that is what makes humanity the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not dangerous because you are violent or cruel, but because you simply refuse to lose. You refuse to give up. You refuse to let evil win. Sarah smiled, tears running down her face. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. She walked to her mother's name on the wall and placed her hand on it. Thelax watched her, this young human who carried her mother's name, and he suspected her mother's spirit. Around him, the plaza was filled with beings from across the galaxy, all here to remember the dead, to honor the sacrifice, to promise that it would never be forgotten. Thelax looked up at the wall of names. Thousands of humans who had died fighting monsters they could barely comprehend, in a war they didn't start, for people they had never met. They didn't do it for glory. They didn't do it for honor. They did it because, as Captain Chen had said, it had to be done. And they chose to be the ones to do it. He had fought the Void Swarmers without fear. He had battled the Reavers without hesitation. He had faced the Zathor without doubt. But standing here, surrounded by the memory of humanity's sacrifice, understanding the depth of their courage, Thelax finally felt something he had never felt before. Not fear of humans, but fear for them, because he understood now what they were. They were the species that stood between the galaxy and the darkness, the ones who would sacrifice everything, endure anything, face any horror because someone had to, and they would never stop. No matter how many died, no matter how many wars came, no matter how much they suffered, humanity would always stand. Because that was their choice, that was their nature. And the rest of the galaxy would never have to face the darkness alone because humans would be there, small, weak, afraid, but standing nonetheless. Someone has to stand. Might as well be them. Thelax placed his hand on the memorial wall, feeling the names beneath his fingers. He had earned the crest of unbroken will by never retreating from battle. But these humans had earned something far greater. They had earned the right to be called the bravest warriors the galaxy had ever known. Not because they didn't feel fear, but because they did, and they fought anyway.